university in their evening program while working full-time in a non-family law specific background. I am a child of divorce, and in particular, I'm a child of high conflict divorce. I have parents that have diagnosed or undiagnosed mental health issues, personality disorders, I believe. I'm not a therapist, so, but I have two siblings. I've seen the impact that the divorce had at the varying ages. I was 10, my brother was 15, my sister was a year and a half younger. The impact it had, I'm from Florida, we were down there. We then moved to North Carolina. My father is still down in Florida. And my mom and my siblings and I moved here. I went to law school. I was a psychology undergrad because I knew that I wanted to do something in relation to children going through a divorce. I didn't know which direction. Eventually I chose going in the direction of being a lawyer. I am doing what I went to law school to do. I didn't go to law school to do any other type of law. Family law is the only type of law that I ever wanted to do. And I love helping families, helping people navigate through one of the most difficult transitions in their life. I've been doing it now. I opened my own practice in 2010 and practiced on my own until 2017 when I closed my practice and joined Haas, Tharrington, and I've been with the firm ever since. Scott is also an attorney at our firm. He joined us in September. He was previously actually a public assistant district attorney. I was going the wrong direction, wrong side of it, in Alamance County. So we have 4 attorneys at our firm. 3 of us practice largely in the typical traditional family law related issues, so divorce, separation, custody, equitable distribution, alimony, child support, all of the things related to a separation or divorce or having children together regardless of your marital status and regardless of your relationship with one another. One of the other partners also does a lot of work in assisted reproductive technology law. So she's helping families create families together. So that's a little bit about me. What we're trying to do here is we're wanting to give back to the community by offering free seminars to give a little bit of legal advice. It's never going to be enough typically for somebody to go out and handle everything. This is not, if you're interested in talking with anybody afterward, you're certainly welcome to speak with us, schedule an appointment, but we're not getting into specifics of people's custody situations. This is sort of an overview. We're also wanting to bring in other related professionals because that is something that people going through a separation and divorce can benefit from. I went through a separation and divorce myself. I watched as a child what happens when you go through a high conflict one. My goal in life was to never go through a high conflict divorce. I only marry men that I won't have that kind of relationship with. So I'm a rare occasion of a positive separation that was amicable. And I'm remarried and happily remarried and hopefully remarried for the last time. So I am somebody who's been through the process from all different sides of it, as a child and as a person who's been through it myself. There are other meetup groups, and I don't know how many of you are familiar with Triangle Divorce and Separated Support Group, which is another meetup group. That one is much more support group, social based. I went through that group for a very long time, was an organizer for it. It's basically you're finding camaraderie with others who've been through this. And it's a great way of transitioning into a social life because sometimes when your marriages end, you lose all the friends. It depends on whether you were the one with them or your spouse was. But having an avenue for support and to get you out of the house and people who've been through it, all different spectrums of it. It was godsend to me when I went through it, and I highly recommend it to anybody. It's how I became familiar with meetup groups in the first place.
What was it called?
It's called Triangle Divorce Separated Support Group, and I'm not plugging them, I'm not associated with them in any way anymore, but it is one out there. There's, Meetup is great because basically if you have any kind of hobby or interest, there's a group out there for that. So I've been members of varying different ones, and I would encourage anybody at this part of the process, and I'm sure Leslie is gonna talk more about that, getting out there and finding shared interests and shared connections with people, just because it keeps your mind off stuff. And it gets you out of the house and avoids grouping. That's just me as a person, not as a lawyer. So what I'm here to talk about is child custody. Leslie, Dory's sheet, I'm gonna read the blurb. And I'm gonna be really, I'm gonna share a really personal anecdote. I know Leslie because my husband and I have been to her. I met her through other networking colleagues, and when my husband and I went through a bit of a whoopsie, moment of needing a little tune-up, we went to her and she was great. I absolutely respected her viewpoints. She's talked with me, this was years ago, talked with me over ways to separate with respect and being without animosity or minimizing the animosity through that. And that's not easy for a lot of people to do, but there are processes. So it was in conjunction with her marriage counseling related tasks, she also does things to help couples who make the decision to separate, do so in a way that is best honors and respects the kids and places the kids first, is child-centered, and doesn't let the past bickering between the parents become the obstacle, which in custody cases is really important, because that's the integration with the mental health. When I talk about the custody cases, the impact of past hurts and harms between you and your spouse or you and your partner when you separate often has an impact when there's children together, and often has a tendency to make it difficult for two parents to keep the children as the priority and to keep their focus on what's best for our children, and not using custody as a new avenue or a different avenue to get back at their ex or to have difficulty communicating. And it could be that the past hurts, depending on the circumstances, make it difficult for the parties to communicate as parents. And that's something you have to go into the process of custody and think about it as you're deciding which approach and what the likely forecast is for you. So she's going to talk a little bit about how you heal and cope from that, from the separation, because that healing process is going to be a part that will certainly help you get through the divorce and will certainly make you more likely and better able to co-parent with your former spouse or soon-to-be former spouse, as well as be a better parent and role model for your children. So it does piggyback with custody. So to get started, everybody's got the overview of the child custody, and I'm going to be going through that. Since only one person, Donna, was here at the last one, some of this may be a bit a repetition of some of what Angela Haas mentioned at the last session, where she did a general divorce 101 overview. Mine's just focusing on child custody. So the first thing is, child custody in North Carolina, the best interest of the child is the polar star. That's the phrase that the courts use. That is what is supposed to guide courts and judges in making a determination about what environment and what circumstances will best have the best effect on the children, and will allow them that will encourage their full development of their physical, mental, and emotional, moral, and physical faculties. So creating the best developmental person. There's a number of factors that a court must consider, as our statutes determine under child custody. Some are required to be considered if they're relevant in the case, and then there's a number if they have to consider all relevant factors. So specifically, any acts of domestic violence between the parties, that's something the court has to consider when they're making a determination on custody. They have to keep in mind the safety of the children and the acts of abuse, neglect, and domestic violence against the children or in the presence of the children, and the safety of either party from the domestic violence that might be committed against them by the other party. That's a pretty significant one that the court absolutely has to, if there's any evidence of a domestic violence background between these parties. Other relevant factors that the court will consider are the ages of the children, which of the parents was a primary caregiver, if there was one. There typically is one that does a lot more in terms of bearing responsibilities. And so if there is one person who's been a primary caretaker, they're gonna take that into consideration. What the parent's involvement has been in the children's extracurricular activities, their health, like medical care, their school, educational pursuits, what the children's health is, and the health of the parents. The court is gonna consider where the child is currently residing. Is the child staying in the primary marital home? Did one of the spouses leave and the children are staying with the parent who stayed in the former marital residence? Where are the new houses, the different houses located? The current school district that the children are in, what the parents' schedules are, what the children's schedules are in terms of extracurricular activities, going to school, leaving school, pick up and drop offs. How is that going to impact the custody arrangement? Are any of the parents using or abusing alcohol or illegal drugs? Or if it's not one of the parents, a caretaker. Sometimes people have family members that provide care. Are any of the family members or other folks that are providing child care using or abusing drugs? And what kind of judgment does that imply about the parent who's putting that child in care of that person? Whether any of the parents are alienating. There was a lot of discussion in the mental health community about something called like alienated parent syndrome or alienated child syndrome. The syndrome hasn't been determined to be real, but there is still parental alienation. There is a process that a parent can go through that diminishes the relationship of the other parent with the child through bad-mouthing the other parent, over-parentifying the child, and that's making the child become like a parent to the parent, doing things that bring the child involved in the court process or in the disputes with the parents, having the child passing messages, and some of this is going to sound very familiar for you later. I'm mentioning it now, but you're going to hear it later when we talk about the do's and don'ts and the mistakes parents make in a custody action. Another issue is, does anybody need to relocate? This is the United States, and parents today have job opportunities that could require them to move far away from North Carolina. What does that mean for the other parent? How is somebody's desire to pursue other jobs going to be impacted? How is somebody's relationship with the child going to be impacted if they're not the primary custodian and the other parent leaves, or if the secondary custodian? Locally they could do a different kind of joint custody arrangement, but once one parent is living too far away, that's not practical. It's not about whether both parents are good or bad or anything like that. It's an impracticality issue. And then there's the children's preference. That one's kind of particularly when they're younger, and depending on the circumstances, kids have preferences. you know, especially as they age and they get into the teenage years, there could be lots of reasons that kids say they want to be with one parent or another. You put an adolescent child, if one of the parents is more strict on the boundaries and limits and, you know, has consequences, they may not like that very much when they're a certain age. They'll appreciate it later, I can trust that. But the other parent may be a lot more laid back on things. They could be really lax. They could get away with a lot more. And so you might have a child that says, hey, I want to go live with this other parent, but when you really question their reasons for it, it's because they like that house number 2 has no rules. That parent lets them get away with everything. That parent's gone all the time. They can party. They can do things that aren't really good for them, as opposed to parent 1 who's setting good boundaries, healthy boundaries, who's involved with their homework. They may, you know, so there might be a lot of reasons. Kids might have a lot of reasons to want to be with one parent over the other. Certainly, my recommendation is if your children are of an age and they're starting to really push on that issue, if they're not in therapy yet, that may be a great time to start getting them into therapy to deal with going through a divorce. I highly recommend having your kids, if they're above a certain age. I mean, obviously little babies and toddlers, they're not going to really benefit initially from a therapist, but once they get to a certain age, 5 and up, I would say that going to a therapist to help them process and talk through and have a confidential place that they can say everything and know that this person is not going to be running and telling the other parent, and can help them, and they can also help the parents understand what might be going on if there's, without disclosing confidences. So those are the factors that a court is going to consider when they make a decision on custody. So everybody talks about this concept of custody, and custody is actually divided into 2 different concepts. There's legal custody and there's physical custody. Legal custody is the authority to make major decisions about your kids. That's the ability to be involved in their upbringing. So that's your major decisions are their education, their religion, medical care, extracurriculars. Those are the biggies. There's a few others that are related to that, but those are the big decisions, and the issue is that's the right to make joint parenting decisions. That's distinct from where the kid's going to be residing. Are they going to spend the night with both parents equally? Are they going to stay with one parent primarily and the other parent on weekends, every other weekend, a variety of secondary visitation schedules? One of the things the court has to consider, if any parent, if either of the parties requests it, they have to consider joint custody. Now, considering it is different from awarding it. So they have to consider the request because somebody asked for it. But that doesn't mean that they have to give that to the party that asked for it. The court has a lot of discretion. They have latitude to determine that that's not what's in the best interest of the kids, because the best interest, the polar star, that's ultimately what the judge's responsibility is in any case that goes to court. So the court has to consider it. There is no presumption in favor of joint custody. That's something that a lot of people would challenge and debate, because it does tend to be that the judges, when you're actually going into court, they do have a tendency to be aligned towards finding some level of joint custody, certainly from a joint legal custody perspective. But there is no presumption that joint custody is what should happen. They don't start there. Another thing that a court's going to have to do if they decide to deny a parent visitation, they have to make findings in their order that explains and justifies how they got to that decision. So there is a constitutional right to the care, custody, and control of your children. And so if a court is going to take away that fundamental right that every parent has equally, they come in with equal standing as that, then the court, if they're gonna not give you, or the other parent, visitation, they're gonna have to explain it. They're gonna have to note in their finding why they found the parent they're denying visitation, either finding them unfit or showing that visitation with that other parent is not in the best interest of the child. But they're gonna have to put specific findings that explain how they got there. Although there's no presumption in favor of joint custody, North Carolina does have a public policy that encourages both parents being involved substantially in their children's lives. So by encouraging focused, good faith, and child-centered parenting agreements that reduce, in an effort to reduce litigation. I mean, the concept behind it is if we come up with a way that's fair and equal, the closer we get and has the parents involved, they're not going to be coming back into court because there's going to be less resentment, nobody's having their rights or having limited time or involvement, and so it would be more fair, and so people presumably wouldn't, that's the assumption. That isn't what happens, but it's the assumption. And there's a lot of people that does actually work really well for. Those are not the ones that would be in court litigating everything anyway. They also want to encourage parents to take responsibility for their children by setting an expectation that parenthood will be a significant and ongoing responsibility. They have they set up programs or encourage the development of programs and core practices that reflect the active and ongoing participation of both parents in the child's life and contact with both parents when such is in the child's best interest, regardless of what the parent's marital status is at that time. Bearing in mind the impact that domestic violence, abuse, neglect, dependency may have. They want to encourage parents to share equitably, and equitable doesn't mean equal, it means fair. So share fairly in the rights and responsibilities of raising their children, even after the marital or non-marital romantic relationship that produced the child has ended. And lastly, they want to encourage each parent to establish and maintain a healthy relationship with the other parent, since that's been determined, or when that's been determined to be in the best interest of the child. Again, there's always caveats and exceptions, because some of those are, what if there a mental illness involved in this family? Is there substance abuse? Is there domestic violence? And all those other factors that I previously enumerated, that those were a number of factors that the court is going to consider. But their goal, there's a general broad concept that it's important for child development to be a whole, healthy, functioning human in the world, that they have both parents significantly, substantially involved in their lives. Both parents are important to child development, and so there is that goal in mind, and that is something that the courts are considering. Judges are sitting on the bench and they're considering, this is the family in front of me, these are the parties in front of me, how can I promote as much of an involvement of both parties, or do the circumstances dictate that that's just not healthy or possible and not best for this child? The judge's priority is the child, not the parents. So there are many times that what's best for the child doesn't comport with what one of the parents really wanted. And that parent walks around upset and resentful and feels like it was not considering their wants and needs. And the issue is the judge can and will consider that. But at the end of the day, their responsibility is to keep the child's best interest in mind and to set a custody schedule that is going to promote and encourage their development. There's a lot of perception and concern among people going through this that the courts are going to favor one gender over another, or one parent over another. And legally speaking, under the law, that isn't true. Could it be more common with certain judges leaning one way or another, depending on the county and community that they're living in, what their life experience is, because judges are humans. They are human beings that are coming onto the bench with their personal life experiences, their education, and how that's gonna impact their decisions. It's why one of the things people say is, one of the most important reasons you get an attorney is because the attorney knows the judge that's gonna get assigned to your case. And so, the more they know that judge, the more they can predict. You know, nobody's got a crystal ball. You know, we can't guarantee any results. But there are certain, the more we've been practicing in front of certain judges, we can anticipate a little bit more, and that helps us advise you on what the possible outcomes are. You don't get to judge shop. In Wake County, the judge gets picked for us. It's gonna be one of 4 people, and we're stuck with whoever that is, whether that's great for us or not so great. And if it's not so great, okay, we know that. Now we know we need to figure this out somehow without going into court. So the North Carolina public policy is that custody cases is not about a parent winning and losing. It's the task of the court is creating a parenting plan that meets the best interests of the child. So going into the 2 different types of custody, you've got the legal custody, and that's the decision making. And the 2 options within that are, that a court is going to be able to consider, is some form of joint legal custody, so shared parenting decision making, or sole or primary decision making. There are 4 main options in a joint parenting, joint legal custody plan that a court could consider. So it's not always 50-50. It's not always an equal parenting decision, because sometimes the conflict between the parents wouldn't make that practical. So the different options are the more conceptual collaboration on all decisions and all major decisions whenever they can. So all major decisions have to be discussed. You have to try to get to an agreement on it. You have to get to an agreement before a decision gets made. Some of the conflicts with that arise if they're in the custody order, if there's not a clear plan in the parenting plan, in the court order, or the custody agreement that establishes what happens if they can't. That's where a lot of conflicts end up over time. They put these plans out together that sound great, we're all getting along today, but when you project out what an attorney is thinking of is, well, yeah, today you're getting along great, but 2 years down the line, 3 years down the line, 5 years down the line, is something gonna happen that's gonna cause, is there gonna be a life change, and now how do we deal with what happens when you guys don't agree? We need to have a tiebreaker. So there's another option that I can tell you, I've got it in here, but I don't know that I've ever seen it in reality, which is that parents get to make major decisions about the kids when they're with them. So, for example, if you have a child with you 50% of the time, and let's say it's a teenage daughter and she wants to go on birth control. If the child is with you and you're okay with it, you take the child to a doctor, you get her on birth control, and now she's on birth control, that regardless, without having to consider the other parent's feelings on that issue. I've never seen that, because that's just not practical, and it's a guaranteed way to cause conflict between parents down the line. One that I have seen pretty significant, which is parents make the big decisions together, so they have to consult with one another. They have to make major parenting decisions together, or changes in anything cannot be made without a tiebreaker built in. But the minor day-to-day things, so we're not talking about where they're going to go to school, major medical, but somebody, if your child is with you, if it's not going to interfere with the other parent's time, can you take them to swimming classes? As long as they're only on your time, yeah, you can do that. What about bedtime and the homework rules and things like punishments when they miss, or consequences, better term, consequences when they, break a rule. A lot of people feel like we need 100% perfect consistency across the households, and that becomes a point of conflict between parents because parent one may be more consistent with adhering to those consequences, and parent number two, they don't have a problem with what happened. It didn't happen at their house. They don't want to have to be stuck with that rule. And a lot of times, it might be that the parent that set the rule up changes it before the child gets to the other parents, and nobody knew. They don't even let them know. So that is the sort of thing that you might see, because that's still the major decisions are having to be brought together, but it's letting the parents on the day-to-day stuff when the kids are there, you deal with your kids there, you don't have to get permission of the other parent before you discipline the child for misbehaving. Put a consequence, tell them that they have to go to bed at a certain time, you have different bedtime. So those kind of the minor, we call those the minor decisions. And then there's the other one, if you have parents that somebody has really strong opinions about something that are possibly irrational, somebody might have more experience in a certain area. For example, one of the parents could be a doctor. We have cases where we got a parent that they practice medicine. So they are, of the two parents, and the other one is not, of the two parents, if a medical decision has to be made, that's the parent who's got the education and the knowledge to be able to understand and be more involved. And sometimes in the event of a disagreement, one of the types of joint legal custody that is provided is is tailoring the custody where one parent gets to make decisions about one area, the other parent may get to make decisions about like the education, what school they're going to go to, and so you kind of bifurcate it. There's still, the idea is still that they're going to communicate together and try to reach agreement. That isn't often what happens when somebody's got final decision making, but the goal is to have them do that. But in the event of a disagreement, you've got your tiebreaker built in because one of the parents gets to make decisions on this issue, and the other parent gets to make decisions on this issue, and you just avoid that. So then you've got sole custody, and sole legal custody is one parent gets to make all the decisions. The other parent, and this in reality tends to, this isn't the most common, joint legal custody does tend to be more common than the other. Sole decision-making authority, that's where they might consider the other parent's wishes, or they might have to keep the other parent informed of what decision they made. And it more often than not tends to go with sole physical custody or primary physical custody, because it's not very common when there's shared physical custody between them. So some of the advantages and disadvantages of the two different types. Advantages of joint custody: parents working together benefits the children. Continuous communication among the child and parents help prevent isolation and prevent other psychological issues from developing that could stem from a feeling of loss after parents divorce or separate. In addition, it allows the child to feel loved by both parents and important to them, because the parents that are collaborating together and are communicating together are placing the child at the forefront and not their conflict with one another. Children who see their parents interact positively also will learn to compromise and work through disagreements more easily, and as a result, they're more likely to have healthy self-esteem when their parents can collaborate. The other is a practical issue. It alleviates the burden of parenting. When you are sharing, you get somebody to bounce ideas off of. When you were married, you probably did that together. Now that you're separated, this is still somebody you chose to bring a child into the world with, in most cases. And we know that there are circumstances, there's no doubt there are circumstances where that's not realistic because of these exception circumstances. But in the average, typical household where there's two mentally healthy but divorcing parents, being able to spitball and bounce your ideas on parenting and make decisions together means the responsibility isn't all on you, particularly if you make the wrong choice. I mean, you guys get to make the choice and you carry the weight of it together. And you also get a different opinion on a situation. You can maybe don't like that opinion, but another opinion matters. It's helpful because, you know, your opinion may not be the best one either. Some of the disadvantages of a joint legal custody is that it's not the best choice for parents who know they're never going to be able to share the responsibilities of raising a child. People who know that from the beginning, joint legal custody is probably not the best bet. It's not a good choice because it's going to be fraught with conflict. Because, like, one parent who handles all the responsibility of parenting gets frustrated when the other parent never steps up. They get to call it joint legal, but it's still one parent having to do all the work, make all the decisions. They can't make any decisions without the other parent's input, and that gets frustrating for the parent that's stuck having to do the heavy lifting for both sides. When there's an acrimonious relationship, it's very difficult to collaborate or communicate with one another. You know, in reality, the way I tend to see it is the parent, when the parents have such a hostile relationship, the innate assumption is to assume the absolute worst perception of what the parent did, instead of the best. Instead of giving them the benefit of the doubt, the assumption, the parents go straight to, they're being a jerk, they're just doing this for this horrible reason, this is just another example of all the different ways that they're selfish, a jerk, you know, beating me up, you know, making my life difficult. And so it just becomes acrimonious, and in those kind of situations, a joint legal custody is just gonna be fraught and increase the conflict. And when conflict increases, you're guaranteed to be back in court. Even if you weren't originally, you could start out, work all custody out, and over time, if you don't have the ability to make decisions together, and you know that in the front end, even if you work out the schedule, in figuring that out, you need to consider, is this going to be somebody that you have to consider your own ability to co-parent with them, and you have to consider their ability to co-parent with you, because you could agree to something on the short term thinking it's going to work out okay, and then a few months later you're in court, or a year later or 2 years later, because all of a sudden you're just sick of it. You agreed to this thing one day to resolve it, to avoid legal fees, something, and in the end you gave up something and you knew it wasn't going to work at the time. Joint legal custody, if you know that, you know, if you've got attorneys or are going to get an attorney, tell them up front why you don't think a joint legal custody would work for you. Because the attorney can say, well, you know, that's nice, but this is what's going to happen anyway. So let's try to figure out how to avoid those points of conflict in the future under this umbrella, or let's go for sole legal custody. You know, family tension impact the ability to make decisions. And the other thing, there's some sacrifices that come when you're sharing joint parenting responsibilities, and that kind of merges with sharing physical custody, is that job, that you have a job opportunity across the country, now you don't get to even consider it. It means that you may not be able to move because it would impact your child's education, and the other parent isn't going anywhere, and now how does that impact where you're going to move and what's going to happen? And so that's one of the disadvantages that a joint legal custody schedule can create. So then we've got, what are the advantages of sole legal custody? You've got, when you have parents that just simply cannot work together, it works better. When one parent makes all the decisions, there's some consistency for the kids. There's some certainty that it's going to, and kids love that, they thrive with consistency. Removing decision-making rights from a parent who's violent or who's substances can protect the child. So that's one of the impacts of domestic violence is domestic abusers, the perception sometimes that once the parties separate, the violence is gonna end, but more often than not, they use custody, when the children are involved, they use the custody and litigation process to further abuse because they lose control otherwise. I do a lot of domestic violence work, so I see this pattern pretty frequently. Some of the disadvantages of sole legal custody is that it's disheartening for the parent who doesn't have decision-making authority. Particularly if they're invested and want to participate and otherwise would have been an equal, cooperative, collaborative parent in raising the children, wanted that role, and to have that taken away can be very discouraging for them. It's obviously in that kind of situation, and many, it builds a lot of resentment between the parties. It diminishes the child's perception of the excluded parent as a parental authority. So a lot of times the parent who doesn't really get to be part of decision making, they either perceive that the child doesn't respect them as much as they do the other parent, or that actually happens. It becomes a source of conflict, and you know, the parent who has to make all the decisions that they make is on them. They don't have somebody to bounce ideas off of. And if they make the wrong call, it's all on them. So there's some consequences that could come with that. So now physical custody is where the child is living, where they physically reside, and the everyday care of the children. And again, that's divided into, there's a distinction between joint and sole physical custody. So joint or shared is where the child spends substantial time with both parents. And as I said earlier, that doesn't necessarily mean equal. There's a perception that joint custody always means 50-50, and it doesn't. It's just substantial. It could be some variation thereof, anywhere between 35 and 50 and 65%. You know, 65, 35, 60, 40, 50-50. When there's sole custody, the child is residing primarily with the other parent, and with one of the parents, and the other parent is getting less time, getting some visitation. In certain circumstances, it may have to be supervised and transitioned in such a way. So some of the pros and cons of each, benefit or an advantage of joint physical custody is that the children are doing better if both parents are significantly involved in their lives. One of the negatives is that frequent custodial exchanges can be unsettling and disruptive for both the children and the parents, and it isn't going to work if the parents don't live close together for such a, depending on the frequency of the exchanges, and related to school, and it's going to limit people's ability to move and take opportunities. With sole custody, some of the positives of sole custody is consistency. The child has the home base, and it's more likely than not the same place they grew up before the parents chose to separate. They have more ability to maintain a routine and a consistent schedule, very stable and predictable. Fewer exchanges. When you have parents that live far away, there will be fewer exchanges between the parents, or for those who have busy work schedules. Some of the negatives are children don't spend time living with both of the parents, so they're not getting substantial relationship with the other parent, and that's going to have a negative effect on the children's development. Also, the non-custodial parent may not get enough time with the child, and the relationship between the parent and the child may suffer as a result. That's where you get the whole concept of the good time dad, or the good time parent, that when they're every other weekend, they're not involved with schoolwork, and they're not involved with projects. They're the parent you go to when you're wanting to go to the movies and go to the zoo and go on trips, but there's no real parenting going on there. The parent who doesn't have primary custody is going to feel the schedule unfair, and again, all of these are things, unfairness, resentment, these are the things that lead to high conflict custody cases that end up in the court and get litigated over and over, and the judges get tired of seeing the parties because they're filing things all the time. There's a couple of custodial examples of custody. So in a 50-50, it comes in a number of forms, and which method is best? A lot of people go into, I want a week on, week off. Well, if you have little kids, that's not really in their best interest. So based on the ages of your kids, may determine that they need a different custody schedule than your standard alternating week. There's one option that I have rarely seen, but I've seen it, I think, once or twice, that had like an alternating 2-week schedule. So one parent gets 2 weeks and the other parent gets the other 2 weeks. I don't think that that's gonna work well for very young kids. That might work well with your upper level teenagers, because they're not needing as much frequent FaceTime with their parents, and I don't mean the Facebook, the phone app. So other examples that people will see, particularly with the younger kids, is something we call it, and it all becomes about numbers. So it's a 2-2-3 schedule, which is 2 days with one parent, 2 days with the other parent, and the weekend with parent A, and then the opposite week it switches to parent B having the first 2 days, parent B. So it's still every other weekend, and then the other 2 days are switching, but they call that a 2-2-3 schedule. Another schedule is a 3-4-4-3 or a 4-3-3-4, which is 3 days with parent A, 4 days with parent B, 4 days with parent A, and 3 days with parent B. So we're always looking at 2-week blocks, because that's still 50-50. There's also one called a 5-2-2-5 schedule, or a 2-2-5-5. However you do it, it still works out the same. It's 2 parents, 2 days with one parent, 5 days with the other. Usually that encompasses a weekend. Then they've got 5 days with the other parent, parent A, and then the last 2 days of the next week with the other one. You might have to change when the weeks start. That's some of the place of flexibility, is to make it flow well. With everybody's schedule, is deciding what is the day of exchange is going to be. But there will be weekends in there for everybody. There's a schedule that I actually have just heard from. One of my clients actually has asked about this recently, which was they wanted to have the other parent have every weekend because of their work schedule, and they would have all the weekdays. So it's, basically 4 and 3. Well, no parent when you separate, I mean, if you take that kind of schedule, you have no weekends to yourself without getting babysitters or grandparents that you can put the kids with. So that was not always something that parents really want. The alternatives are primary custody. Some of the examples of the schedule that you might see with that might be, that's the more common every other weekend schedule. So one parent has primary custody and every other weekend they're with the other parent, whether that's a long weekend from Friday to Monday, Thursday to Sunday, Thursday to Monday, some variation thereof, but they're with the other parent every other weekend. They can then, that can include sometimes dinners or overnights in the middle of the alternating week that they wouldn't have a weekend, but that's still one parent having primary custody. One of the other examples, and I don't see this one very often, but it was in something that I was reading, is somebody gets a week every 3rd week of the year. So they count 3 weeks, and 1 out of 3 weeks, they've got a whole week. The other one might be somebody gets the 1st, 3rd, and 5th weekends of every month. Somebody might, an alternative to the same thing is 2nd, 4th, and 5th weekends, because there's only a couple months a year that there's even a 5th weekend. But that's to get extra time in that way. And of course, when we're talking about your regular custodial schedule, and where it gets tricky is when you have kids in differing school schedules, because in Wake County, we've got year-round school, traditional school, modified year-round, and if you've got, high school, middle school, elementary, and high schoolers in, I think that one almost always covers a traditional calendar, and then you've got a middle schooler or an elementary schooler on one track and another one on a different track. Now, good luck figuring out how all the holidays are not going to work very easily. It becomes more challenging. And so it may be that you have one schedule for these kids and one schedule for a different child, and you're trying to work it out. But figuring some of these holidays and school break times is actually much harder than the generalized, everybody can get to the agreement. I spend probably more time trying to figure out the holidays and the breaks and how that's going to work with the regular schedule to avoid somebody ending up with too many weekends in a row. You have to craft it very carefully. So if you're doing a custody agreement, there's a number of other terms and provisions that you would get into that can help. My goal when I'm representing somebody early on is, what can I anticipate as best I can? I can't fix everything, but to the extent I can we anticipate the types of areas in my experience that I've had high conflict custody cases, how can I minimize that from the beginning? These people start out early, and so we've got communication rules, decision-making rules, we've got tiebreakers built into it. I mean, if I have the ability to get that detailed with it, we're minimizing the likelihood that they're gonna come back to court because we've resolved those types of situations ahead of time and anticipated them. That means they're never gonna go back to court if there are grounds that somebody could, but over high conflict, we're trying to avoid some of that. So, all of these things are talking about what happens when you have a case that some of these decisions along the way, the decisions on joint legal custody, on joint physical, builds the resentment. The schedule thought it was gonna be great and it isn't, or the court determined something different. How do you figure out a solution to avoid conflict or to deal with parties that can't communicate well, can't make decisions together, can't co-parent? And I've got a list I've got those listed on the outline. There are parenting coordinators. You would go, those are somebody who gets their quasi-judicial role, so they have the ability to make decisions in the event that a tiebreaker person, they can help guide you to making decisions together when you're just getting hung up in the communication problem. They can give you a model for communications, how to make them more business-like and avoid some of the triggering phrases and words. You go to a co-parenting therapist, sometimes that's something that we encourage, or a family therapist to help you resolve it. But ultimately, they don't have any authority to make the decision for you. And so if that's not gonna be helpful, it can be frustrating. You can go to mediation or arbitration, that's another neutral person whose job it is. In mediation cases, they're more often than not, they're an attorney or an arbitrator has the ability to make a final decision for you. If you can't get to one, you go to that person and you split the costs. You could, if you're having a disagreement on an isolated issue, not a broad custody, but a final issue of medical treatment, for example, where they're gonna go to school, you can go and have a hearing on just that issue without changing anything else with custody, but just go to court to get that decision decided. One of the things that is very common these days, there are communication tools that are out there. One website is called Our Family Wizard. The courts are starting to just put that into custody orders these days. They highly recommend it because it's trackable, it's online, it keeps a record, it's got a shared calendar, it's got a shared like email messaging, it's got areas where you can exchange documents, all of it is incorporated there, and somebody can't delete it and say, oh, I never got it. If somebody put something on a calendar and then the other person took it off, the system is tracking it, and so it's one of the ways of avoiding conflicts. Or having evidence if you have to go to court. And of course, in the worst case scenario, if things are just really bad, there are certain circumstances. If somebody is if one parent is being cooperative and the other parent is just constantly not cooperating, they're constantly making things difficult, they refuse to engage in the process, it's their way or the highway, they don't consider the other parent, the court could choose to say, okay, you know what, you can't co-parent, so we're gonna take decision-making away from you altogether. Maybe you're abusive, and so we're gonna take physical custody, we're gonna limit your physical custody as well. So that's the worst case type of scenario when you've got that. I've given you a worksheet with some do's and don'ts for what to do if you're going to court, to help you put your best foot forward. And I'm not going to read through all of them. You can read, but you've heard the overall theme when it comes to custody is that the court their desire, there's a public policy interest in people being able to work together to parent their kids. So anything that you can do to make yourself look more cooperative, being more cooperative, is going to be better than being a source of conflict. Bad mouthing the other parent is not going to be good. Constantly telling your kids should never know about the litigation going on or the legal process. They're children. And I don't care how mature they are or they seem, they're children, and they don't need to get involved in that, because that's part of how parents get alienated. It over-planifies them. It's not good for them developmentally. So ultimately, document. That's the thing I can't get people to do enough, is if you're having a custody case, learn how to start documenting your issues. Keep journals, keep emails, start using email over text messages, because text messages are problematic from an evidentiary standpoint. People switch phones, something happens to their phone, and poof, a text message is gone. And they don't think about it, and it could be that it's years later, and now you're having to deal with the fact that for 3 years you've been fighting and have this person's always been a problem, and now you want to show that and you don't have the evidence. So use email over text messages, except for last-minute exchanges, will be a recommendation. But getting documents together, helping your lawyer by having all of that ready to go, getting an attorney, understanding the legal process. These are things that you can do, and basically, it all boils down to don't be a jerk. Courts don't like jerks. And the last thing that's in the outline that I wanted to talk about is, and I don't have a sheet for this, but it's the top 5 mistakes that parents make when co-parenting. Pumping the kids for information about the other parent. That's horrible. Don't do it. Sharing divorce and other inappropriate details about the other parent with the kids. Don't tell your kids that mom's taking me back to court. The judge told me that said I can't spend time with you. I mean, don't tell them that. It becomes frightening for them. There's a number of other things, but it's just not good, and don't do it. Don't make the child become your messenger. You're the adult, talk to the other parent, communicate with them directly. Your children shouldn't be passing messages between the 2 parents for you. That's not their job. Their job is to be kids and to be loved by both of you. Don't be rigid on the parenting schedule. People have stuff come up, and they need, don't be so rigid, particularly if your child wants to go to the other parent or go do something with the other parent. Don't be the jerk that says, no, my custody order says this. I'm not going to do it. Well, I mean, how is that good for your kids? Don't fight with the other parent in front of the kids. That's damaging to them. If you find yourself doing these things, look, everybody has bad parenting moments, I call them. This is an emotional process. Depending on the circumstances that led you to separate, it can be harder than at other times to communicate with the other parent. If you find yourself doing that, pause for a minute. Try to evaluate, why are you engaging in that behavior? What is your goal? What's your agenda? What are you focusing on? What are your reasons? If it's about getting back at the ex, not because it's for the benefit of your child. If it's for the benefit of your child, you can fight for that. But if it's not, if it's just because you're pissed off with your ex, that's not putting your kid first. And keeping the child as the focus and the best interest of the child will limit how much you do that and will encourage you to be more positive, and that's ultimately going to be better for your kids as well. And so with that, I'm going to let Leslie come up and take over.
Perfect segue, by the way. Tell you a little bit about myself. My name is Leslie Voorhees. I've been a licensed marriage and family therapist. I've been in private practice since 2004. And part of how I got started down the pathway I did is one of my very first clients was a 5-year-old little girl brought to me with anxiety. Well, of course she had anxiety because she was the rope in her parents' tug of war from the time they divorced when she was 2.5. And pretty much everything that could happen did. There were allegations of abuse, sexual abuse. There were step parents, step siblings, you name it, I mean, no wonder this little girl had problems. And so that would have been in what, maybe 2004, 2005, so she's 19, 20 years old now. I ran into her grandfather. He was talking about, oh, how his granddaughter was getting married, and I mentioned this girl's name. He goes, oh, no, that one, not that one, she's just a mess. I could have predicted when she was 5 years old. So what my whole practice has been is to protect her. Because I'm also the child of divorce. So I kind of went the opposite way to Dana, and my goal is to try to help people stay together. Now, sometimes that's not possible. And so what I also help people do is figure out how to manage the process. And one of the things is, we have, somebody did, and I didn't know their name before I did this, I just knew this, that the Holmes and Ray scale of stressful life events. Divorce is number 2, marital separation is number 3. Number 1 is the death of a loved one. The thing about a death of a loved one is they're no longer on the planet. You don't have to interact with them. You don't have to deal with them. But with a divorce, you do. So in my particular case, I think it's actually a little bit more stressful because if the person's gone, as horrible as that is, we can manage to get through it. It's different when that person keeps showing up on our doorstep or we run into them. It's really, really hard. And we think about loss as a death, but a divorce, nobody gets married wanting to get divorced. It's a loss. Even if you're the one who initiated it, it's still a loss. Doesn't mean it didn't have to happen, it just still, there's a lot to go through. And so the 5 stages of grief are part of the process. First one, denial. Now, even the person who initiates the divorce has gone through denial at some point in time in the process. They've just been still married when it's happened. They're trying to figure out, is this really happening? Is this person, I can't figure out how to get my partner to listen to me. It's all this stuff. And I've actually dealt with many, many clients who have been married to either narcissists or borderline, people with borderline personality disorder. Really tough. Really, really tough to do. And if you do not have the skills to deal with it, it's just an ongoing thing. My belief system is that this little girl who got me started on this path, her mother was borderline, never really spent that much time with her father because the allegations of sexual abuse came in before I could even talk to him, and that just blew everything up. And by the way, they were unfounded, but it didn't happen. So when you're dealing with a particularly difficult person, getting through the 5 stages of grief is tough. If you're the one who thinks everything's been fine, and suddenly my partner comes in and says, I want a divorce, and I'm like, head upside head, and it's like, oh my God, that denial, that shock, that I don't even know what's happening. We go through that. Now, generally, that particular stage doesn't last too terribly long because reality sets in. Stage number 2, anger. That's where a lot of people get stuck. I grew up with a young lady, well, actually, I was an adult. I knew her when she was a teenager. And I think her parents got divorced when she was like 6 or 7, so I knew her when she was in high school. And then I also knew her mother later. And her mother never did get over being angry at her dad. He'd gone on, married, blah, 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 and she was stuck. And she was one of the most miserable people I've ever met in my life because she could not get past it. She could not get past it. Okay. My mom, married to my dad for 20 years, divorced, married to another man. Now, my stepmother still lives alive, and my mother does not understand why my children have anything to do with this. And I'm like, okay, Mom, it's been 40 years. Can you please let it go? Anger is a place where we get really stuck. That's where a lot of people, I'm mad. Yeah, your partner maybe did something really horrible to you. Yeah, they did. But it's hurting you, and it's hurting, it's keeping you from moving on and having a good life. Next stage is bargaining. This is when we kind of like try to noticed when I read it, that guilt is bargaining wingman. Guilt comes right along with the bargaining. I'm feeling bad. Maybe if I hadn't done this, maybe if I had done this instead, maybe if my partner had done this. Oh my God, the what ifs, we're gonna get caught. Okay? I do think it's very healthy, absolutely necessary for a happy life to figure out what happened. To take a look and go, okay, what is my part in this? Not from a bargaining standpoint, not from a guilt standpoint, but from a place of, oh, I need this information for my personal emotional health in any future relationships I want to be in. Then we have depression. This is another this is another common place where people get stuck. They're very sad. They're overwhelmed. They don't know what to do. There's a lot of hostility in this stage, and it's like you see this with it's not so much anymore, but somebody who may have not been out of the workforce and now suddenly they have to get a job, and they have been out of the workforce. Maybe they've been a stay-at-home parent. They've been out of the workforce for 10, 15 years, and now they have to go back to work. That was my mom. She was overwhelmed. She didn't know what to do, and so we can get really caught up in this, and partially in the depression is also where we get caught at the victim stage. My partner, my partner did this to me. I was blameless. And then the last one is acceptance, and that was usually pretty easy. That's when we can look at our partner, our ex-partner, with kindness, with generosity, and we can really wish them well in their life. Okay. These are stages that we all have to go through. Now, the first one and the last one are usually pretty clear. Denial and acceptance, you kind of know when you're in it. The other three are not clean. You can jump from one to the other to the other. Now, we generally will spend a little bit more time in one stage until we work through it. And these aren't pleasant. Nobody likes going through a grief process. And so a lot of times we try to divert from it. So you might have friends who encourage you to go online dating. You may not be ready for that. I'm sure we've all seen, they're very common characters in sitcoms on television or in movies, the embittered, person, the person who talks about, well, all men are this and all women are that. And stop. And you may even have friends that encourage that is not healthy or helpful for you. Yes, your partner may not have done something very nice. And indeed, the truth be told, your partner or your ex-partner could actually be a jerk. Focusing on that is not going to help you get it. It just isn't. On here I talk about 5 questions to ask yourself as part of the process of healing. What are the first ones? Are you still in love with your ex? If you're not the one who initiated the divorce, you may still very much be in love with that person. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's just how, and by the way, that's not the same thing as loving them. Hopefully, when we get to acceptance, we will have a certain love for our ex, especially if they're the other parent. Okay? If they're involved in our children's lives, you want to have that really positive feeling towards them. It's the same thing with being in love. Okay? But if I'm still in love with you, then I'm stuck. So it's working through that. Are you currently experiencing feelings of hurt? That's in that depression stage. Am I hurting? What do I want to do with this? How am I hurting? What's this about? What would make me feel better? Are you scared, either about where you are now or what the future might hold? Okay. Again, just a place to take a look. Okay. Are you angry with your ex or still with your ex? You know, your life is, your life is different than you thought it might be. And this person may be the one who did that. What do you want to do with that anger? Anger is a lot, there's a, I don't know if it's a cliche, a saying that, resentment is like you taking poison and expecting the other person to die. Anger is the same way. Okay? Forgiveness is not for the other person. Forgiveness is for you, so that you can no longer be emotionally tied to that event. And that's really it's like, if you are still emotionally reactive to your ex, you have not healed and you are not ready to move on. Many people jump into other things thinking, well, if I just find somebody else, or if I just do this. What happens is, if you are not healthy, no relationship that you're in can be healthy. And if you're still tied to a past relationship, and I'm not saying, if you have children, you will always be connected to this other person as long as any of the three of you are still alive. Okay? But being connected to somebody is different than being tied to them. Right? And it's how do we move through all these feelings, and a lot of times we don't want to feel them. We just shove them under the rug, put them in the closet, make them go away. I'm just going to go on with my life until you get into a relationship with somebody else, and then they all come flying out of it. Okay. And many people, not everybody who gets divorced gets involved in another relationship, but many people do. And what you want to do is not let past relationship pollute the current and future one. And so doing all of this healing, being able to talk, being able to, like I said, really have, be joyful, that your ex is doing well, that you really want them to be doing well, especially if you have kids. You really want to have your, because if they're doing well, your kids are probably doing well. Okay? And it's hard because divorce is on some level rejection. Either you're rejecting your ex or they're rejecting you. And I had a colleague say this one day to me, and I was a good thing I was sitting down, because it was like, oh my God, that is the most depressing thing I've ever heard in my life. But what he said was, all relationships end in tragedy. I went, oh hell, that's so depressing. But I think it should just be all relationships end. It's like, because either somebody leaves the planet, or the relationship is over. And to be prepared for that, and to know how to handle it, and know how to take care of ourselves. And one big component of healing is self-care, which, which I think is kind of what Dana was alluding to when she was talking about the custody arrangement where the person never had the weekend off. It's like, we need to take care of ourselves. If we don't take care of ourselves, we can't take care of anybody else. We can't be in a relationship with anybody else. And I think it's critical to get some perspective on what happened in the relationship. How did it fall apart? How did it end? What was my part in it? And I'm going to tell you, I actually also started out working in domestic violence. So I understand that there are some times when it's, my part in it may not be anything other than I didn't leave. Okay? And And by the way, when you look at this, it's not from a place of judgment. It's from a place of information. What did I miss? What did I, and sometimes, and to be honest, sometimes our partners are not honest with us. They do not tell us stuff. I call it the mind reading school of marriage. Not a fan. If you loved me, you would know. Oh my God. Or they're only doing it because I asked. So the alternative is they're not going to do it. I don't know, which is worse. But there are, sometimes our partners are not evolved people relationship-wise. Okay? That's okay. But there's always something we can learn from that, even if it's, I never want to see that again. Don't want any part of that in my life, ever again. Okay? But we can't, but in order to get there, we actually have to go through the hurt. We actually have to sit with it, which, by the way, in our society, let me go be on Facebook. Of course, that'll depress you, because all you do is look at everybody else's highlight reel. Oh, look at them. It's like, I want to see the person, the ugly crying, the makeup down the face. I want that picture on Facebook. I don't look what I look this morning. We divert. It hurts. We don't want to be hurt. We want the hurt to stop. And I'm not saying wallow in it, because that's the other thing we do. It's about being healthy. It's about figuring out, what do I want? And some people don't want to be in another relationship. That's fine. But it needs to be a choice, not a reaction. Does that make sense?
How long does the reaction period last?
Well, I'm going to say if it's still there, it just means there's still more work to do. And a lot of times, and I think this is one of the things that the other meetup group you were talking about, the support group, that can help as long as it's not a pity party. That doesn't help. Going to a coach or a therapist who can walk you through these things. Because here's the deal. I've tried. I can't get out of my own head. I can't see things that other people can see. Now, I can see things that other people can't see, because that's, it's like, oh, did you think about this? And they're like, oh, I didn't even know about that. Because we're caught in our own heads. As little kids, we think anything is possible. I mean, a little kid seriously believes they can fly. They have no idea about gravity and all that other stuff. They don't. But as they get older, we limit. And so we get very used to what we're thinking. And so it's really hard to work through some of these things. And sometimes it just helps to say them out loud, or write them down in a journal. Get them out of your head. Because we'll just sit around and it's like, and we can glom onto our hurts. And they're real hurts. It's not that they're not real. It's just, do we want to use them? Or do we want to sit in them? Because using them will help us grow. Using them will, I'm of the opinion, and I've been in some really lousy relationships. Really. But if I could go back, I would thank those people. Thank you. It sucked at the time, but it sure told me what I didn't want. I'm who I am because I was in those relationships. I can always walk away with something. Some of the relationships that ended, I thought they were great relationships, bad timing, whatever it was, they were. But they were great relationships. Other ones, yeah, okay, thanks. But actually, if I had a do-over, there might be one I would go, yeah, we'll do that one. But most of the other ones, I'd say, yeah, I probably would. But I have to be willing to look at them, and I have to be willing to look at, why did you do that? What was, because, and this is especially true when we're talking about custody and co-parenting and working with somebody, we have so much control over, we can't control the other person. Give that up right now. but I can control it. I don't have to react to what that person's doing. I would tell my clients, especially some of them who had extremely difficult exes, take the high road. Do not get down in the mud with them. First off, they can outnudge you. You're never gonna get as down and dirty as they are because that's not who you are. So don't try. But what you can do, take the high road, be the person that you want to be. One, your kids will thank you for it, and they will notice. Because I had a client, dad was the fun dad. And the mom, she had been stay-at-home, she struggled to get a well-paying job, and he had lots of money. And took kids all over the place, and I said, don't go there. Just don't. I said, they will find out who he is. 6 months later, when she came in, she said, kids and I were in the park the other day, and I said, Mom, we would rather spend the day in the park with you than go to Disneyland with Dad. She looked at me, she said, how did you know? I said, because we all know who people are. They will tell us who they are. Okay? And this goes to not bad-mouthing your ex. Your kids will figure it out. If they are dependable people, your kids are going to figure it out. And so what you want to do is be the best that you can be and be that example for them. And be that example for you because you deserve to be happy. And it is a situation, yes, you will always be divorced, but it's a temporary thing. The pain of it can be temporary if you take the steps to work through all of this stuff. You know, and it's not easy. So I mean, even though my primary goal is to try to help marriages stay together, my secondary goal is to make sure that people are, in my world, miserable in marriage don't belong in the same sentence. So my goal is to help people recover and be ready to, if they want to be in another relationship, because you will be in another relationship with someone, whether it's a romantic relationship or not, that's neither here nor there. But the impact of how you handle this is going to impact friendships, work relationships, your relationships with your kids. It impacts everything. Because if we hold on to this hurt, if we hold on to this anger, if we don't heal, it's just going to seep out into everything. And so my thing is let's just put it on the table. So whether that's going to a meetup group, where I know several churches have divorce support groups, whether it's, you know, finding a really good friend, not your child, to talk through this with, whether it's another professional, it's an investment in you and your future happiness and to help you through the pain of this, so that you can go on and live the life that you want. So that's all right.
All right.
Not too terribly late.